Before we get started on the Dharma talk, please join me in invoking the Buddha's name 3 times. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Since we are celebrating Ullambana next weekend, I thought I would deviate from our dependent origination talks and speak a little bit on Ullambana, on the holiday, on the tradition of Ullambana. As I was reading through it, I concluded that I can add some dependent origination pieces to it. So it worked pretty well with the overall teaching of Ullambana. So as a reminder, next weekend, Sunday, we will have the Ullambana celebration at 10 a.m. So we will not have the 12:30 service. So everyone is humbly invited to Ullambana, so I hope everyone will be able to attend this very important holiday. So, the Ullambana celebration, Ullambana literally means upside downness from Pali. But we typically refer to it as Parents' Day or Ancestors' Day, for the most part, or in Chinese traditions also called Ghost Festival. But we will keep it to Parents' Day, Ancestors' Day. But one of the concepts or one of the ideas of Ullambana is to simply remind ourselves or to remember this idea that we do not arrive in this life alone. And so whatever we've become, whatever we have accomplished, whatever wisdom we've gained, whatever strength that we possess, it's all those conditions are, of course, our parents, right? And our families, our teachers, our communities, and all the people that have offered us care and support as we've gone through life. And so Ullambana at least gives us an opportunity to stop and remember, right? But it's also a reminder that remembrance alone isn't enough. And the Buddhist teachings ask us to transform that remembrance into understanding, into gratitude, return gratitude into action, and attachment into liberation. And so I'll quickly go over the story of Ullambana. The story, nonetheless, is still an important one to remember. So Ullambana was kind of created, the tradition of Ullambana was created because of one of the Buddha's main disciples named Mahamudgalyana. And Mahamudgalyana, when he attained full enlightenment, right? Those that have attained full enlightenment have 6 spiritual powers. But for Mahamudgalyana, when he had attained enlightenment, he was distraught because his parents had passed and he wanted to know where they were. If they were okay, if they were born in a heavenly realm or in hell or whatever realm of existence. So Mahamudgalyana used his, what that power specifically is called, but as a hungry ghost. And in Buddhist cosmology, a hungry ghost is typically imaged as this tall, lanky person that's just a skeleton but has a big belly and a long, thin neck. And so, saddened that his mother was a hungry ghost, and clearly seeing that she was hungry, he used his spiritual powers to kind of create a bowl of rice for her so that she could eat. But because in her previous life she was not a very good person, she was very selfish. She did not care for others. She did not show any support to the monastics, or the monks and nuns. She even talked bad about them. She would, in some stories, she would provide them dog meat, right? Just to kind of, she was an awful person, basically, right? And so because of that, she was born as a hungry ghost. But as hungry ghosts are, even though they have food, so even though Muhammad Galiana's mother had a bowl of rice, because of her selfishness and her eagerness to consume, she had the bowl of rice in one hand and shielded the rice from other hungry ghosts with the other hand, so she tried to consume the bowl of rice in secret, pretty much. But since she's a hungry ghost, she couldn't consume the rice. Every time she attempted to take a bite, it would turn into coal. And so it was inconsumable, right? She was able to eat the rice. And so saddened by this, right, as Muhammad Galiana had seen, she was able to eat the rice because it would turn to coal. So saddened by this, he went to the Buddha and asked the Buddha, and let the Buddha know that, you know, his mother was in hell or as a hungry ghost, and she was able to eat, and he wanted to save her. What could he do? So the Buddha told Muhammad Galiana, such a tongue twister, that he himself, on his own, couldn't save her, and needed the collective kind of energy and needed the collective assistance from the whole Sangha in order to help her. So with 99 other monks and himself, there's 100 monks. They all gathered and collectively had offerings and pretty much chanted for not just his mother, but for all the other hungry ghosts in hell. So with this collective kind of energy, with this collective idea of wanting to save those beings, they were all able to get out of the hungry ghost realm and be able to be reborn in a heavenly realm. And so because of this, once that had happened, that's when Muhammad Galiana asked if this is something that others can do. And the Buddha kind of gave his approval and was like, yeah, we can totally do this again, pretty much. And so it became a tradition that on every year of, I forgot what day specifically, I think it's the 15th day of the 7th month, lunar month, is when we would celebrate Ullambana in order to help alleviate those who have passed and help them escape if they are in a lower realm of existence, to help them escape those lower realms and be reborn in higher realms of existence. So that's the story of Ullambana, right? So take it as is. Muhammad Galiana was a historical figure. Story, on the other hand, it's just a story, right? So we have to take it literally, but there are the symbolism of the story is what is important here. So the kind of the moral of the story, really, or one of the moral of the stories, is that our lives are interconnected. That the happiness or suffering that we create does not just stop with us, right? Our actions affect our parents, our children, our partners, our friends, our communities, right? And all the generations that come after us. And this is why Ullambana is not just a ceremony for our ancestors or for the dead, right? It's also a teaching for us, for those that are living and will be alive. And then comes a question in one of the, Ullambana there's 3 main Ullambana sutras. And in one of the sutras, it describes the ways that we can show gratitude to our parents. And it's kind of asking what do we owe our parents, really? And so when we speak about filial piety or filial gratitude, right, it's easy to think that we owe our parents just because they gave us life. But Buddhism, as usual, asks us to look a little bit more deeply than that. Because a human life is a result, as we know, of countless conditions. So our parents may have given us our physical existence, right? But teachers have given us knowledge, friends have given us companionship, communities have gave us a whole plethora of opportunities. Strangers have produced the food that we consume, right? And created the roads that we travel on. And created all these different conditions that allow us to live our lives comfortably. And so if we look carefully, we can begin to see that our existence is relational, right? There's no completely independent me that's in control of everything. Because the food that we, as we know, came from somewhere, the language we speak comes from somewhere, the knowledge from our minds also came from somewhere, and even our ideas of who we are shaped by countless people and experiences that we've gone through. So the Buddha calls attention to this interconnectedness because seeing it clearly awakens this illusion of this isolated self. And when we understand our interconnectedness, then gratitude naturally arises. And this isn't the normal, oh, thank you type of gratitude. Because in Buddhism, gratitude is much deeper than that. It goes beyond just simple words. And so the Buddha then asks, if we truly appreciate our parents, how do we live? If we truly appreciate those who sacrifice for us, what kind of person do we become? If we truly recognize the suffering our parents experience, can we continue the same patterns of anger, resentment, and violence? And this is where gratitude becomes actual practice. Because it could be that the greatest way to actually repay our parents is not simply to give them money or gifts or material objects, right? Or elaborate ceremonies when they've passed during their funerals, but it's to become a person who suffers less and causes less suffering. So if our parents gave us life, then we can honor that life by learning how to live wisely. And if they struggle to provide for us, then we can honor their effort by not wasting that life that that helped make possible. And if they've made mistakes, as the Buddha said, that we can honor them not by pretending those mistakes never happened, but by learning from them and refusing to pass that same suffering to the next generation. And the Buddha reminds us that this is an important distinction because filial gratitude does not require us to idolize our parents. Because parents are also just human beings, right? They have their own fears, they have their own wounds, their own limitations, their own mistakes, their own suffering. Some parents were loving, some parents were absent, some parents may have been difficult to live with, some may have caused us deep pain, right? But in Buddhism, it's not asking us to deny reality in the name of filial piety, but instead, Buddhism asks us to see reality deeply for what it is, right? To clear our ignorance. So we can acknowledge what was good without denying what was painful. We can understand someone's suffering without excusing their harmful behavior. And we can choose to we can choose to not continue that cycle. And sometimes breaking the cycle of suffering is itself an act of filial gratitude. And so that means that Ullambana also allows us to let go. Because those who Sorry, I'm skipping something that I don't want to go into. Okay, I'll start skipping. I'm skipping the dependent origination piece. So going back a little bit, Ullambana is about, or reminding us that we can also let go of those types of thinking, those types of attachments. And if we're able to remember those that have passed, the Buddha says, that we may experience sadness, regret, longing, anger, or even guilt. But then the Buddha asks us to think, asks us that we may think during those times, I wish I had said more. I wish I had spent more time with them. I wish that I was more patient, or if I just could have one more conversation, right? Because we can acknowledge that these are thoughts that are deeply human, right? These are natural thoughts that we have when someone passes away, right? All this wave of regret, sometimes, not for everybody, may come upon us, right? But Buddhism teaches us to look carefully at that type of attachment, because love and attachment are not always the same thing. Because love can say, I am grateful that you are part of my life. But attachment will say, I need you to remain here so that I can be okay. So love can remember, but attachment refuses to let go. And Ullambana therefore becomes this practice of both remembrance and release of letting go. So we can remember our parents. We can recognize what they gave us. We can acknowledge what they could not give us. And we can acknowledge that pain that existed, but slowly we can start to also let that go. Not because they were unimportant in our lives, but because they are or were important. In one of the Ullambana sutras, the Buddha gives us, right, these examples of ways that we kind of give things to our parents, the ways that we give offerings. And if you've ever been to a Buddhist funeral, or will ever go to a Buddhist funeral, you'll typically see several tables, but two main tables. One table is offering for the Buddha, and one table is offering for the deceased. And on this table, there's a picture of the deceased, there's food, there's incense, there's candles, there's flowers, there's all these different offerings, right? Which is okay, that we can give. But we also have to remember that these flowers will eventually wither, right? That the food will eventually be consumed. The incense will eventually become ash. And all these material things, even though they're meaningful, they are temporary, right? And so the Buddha reminds us the most meaningful offering is the transformation of our own life. So that when we become less angry, we honor them. When we become more compassionate, we honor them. When we stop passing our trauma and anger to our children and to our friends and family, we honor them. And when we learn to forgive, not necessarily forget, right, but releasing our hatred, we also honor them. And when we practice the Dharma sincerely, then we're able to transform that suffering that has been transmitted to us, right, through our generations. And so one of the greatest offerings, as the Buddha says, that we can give our parents is the offering of Dharma, right? And there's like a hierarchical list somewhere in one of the sutras, I believe, where it's saying, you know, the first offering you give your parents is materialistic things, money, food, stuff, pretty much, right? The second offering, good offering, is the discussion of Dharma. The third greatest offering, or I think maybe it's part of the second too, is bringing them to the temple, right? And the greatest offering is to learn the Dharma, or take refuge, I think is the correct terminology. The point is, the Dharma is the greatest offering you can give yourself or to others, right? Because it takes away the types of attachment that we have to materialistic things, right? Because most people think, oh, if I have this, I'll be happy. If I just can accomplish this, I'll be okay. If I just achieve this, then, people know me, blah, blah, blah. There's all these things that are just creating more things, more suffering when they eventually disappear or don't last. The gift of Dharma allows us to escape those ideologies, right? Allows us to see the true nature of things, to see the ephemeral nature of everything that we want to consume, want to have, want to achieve. And we're free from all that. There's no greater freedom than that, I would assume, right? And this is why the Buddha says that the Dharma can be understood as an offering. So our practice becomes an offering to those who have come before us. And we're able to give that offering to others, and it kind of continues this domino effect, right? That if I teach you the Dharma, then you'll go out and not necessarily teach it, but if you apply the Dharma to your life, right? And you make subtle changes, sometimes noticeable changes, sometimes no changes at all. But the way we live our lives, the thoughts that we have, the speech that we speak, and the actions that we do are all influenced by the idea of suffering and the eradication of suffering. If we're able to live our lives like that, then we don't have to necessarily speak the Dharma or teach it. We just live it, and others will see how we live. Like, oh, you look at peace, you look happy, you look like you have less suffering than I do. Right? And so the connection there between living a materialistic life and a simple life becomes pretty evident. And that's kind of the practical side of our practice, right? And kind of one of the main lessons when we celebrate Ullambana. And it's also a reminder that we should not wait until someone dies to express our gratitude. Because too often, we simply just wait too late, right? And we'll tell ourselves, oh, I'll visit my parents or family whenever. I'll visit them later. I'll call them later. I'll talk to them. And then by pushing these excuses, right? We never know that tomorrow will ever come, or it's not a guarantee. But we continue to assume tomorrow is a guarantee. And so we put off things all the time, right? I've been putting off mending some of my robes for a couple weeks now. It's not going to be mended. And so the Buddha, then again, reminds us if your parents are still alive, right? Or in the teachings reminds us if they're still alive, then call them. If you can visit them, right? If you can apologize, right? If you can forgive, then consider forgiving. And if the relationship, even if the relationship's complicated, right, then we can at least start with something that's simple, right? We can, even if it's just a small act of gratitude of saying, I appreciate or I'm grateful that you've given me life, right? The very minimum. This doesn't mean that every wound or hurt that they gave us disappears, right? It doesn't mean that every conflict that we ever had with them will ever disappear or get resolved, but it does at least it is a beginning to understanding, right? And if our parents are no longer alive, they've already passed, then at the very least we can remember that we can't change the past. We can't have another conversation. We can't go back and do or say things that we wish we did or said. But we can continue that relationship with them in a different way. And we can at least carry forward and remember what was good. And we can learn from what was painful. We can embody the values that they taught you. You can become kinder because they taught you kindness. You can become wiser because their mistakes taught you what not to repeat. And you can transform that grief into compassion. And so that parent may not be physically there anymore, but the conditions they help create continue through you, regardless. So in that sense, what they gave you has not completely disappeared, because it's going to continue on. And we know that every generation receives something from our past generations, and our future generations will receive or learn something from our generation, right? It'll continue on. So now the question becomes, what are we passing on, right? Are we passing on fear? Are we passing on anger? Is it resentment? Is it prejudice, discrimination, right? Unresolved trauma? Or are we trying to pass on wisdom, compassion, patience, understanding, right? Freedom. And this is where Ullambana becomes a much bigger ceremony than just celebrating our parents. Because then it becomes a reflection of the continuation of suffering and the possibility of ending it. And as we know, the Buddha taught that suffering arises through conditions. And if we continue the conditions that produce suffering, then suffering will continue. But if we change the conditions, then something different from that suffering is possible. Right? Perhaps that one of our greatest ways to honor our parents is by allowing that chain of suffering to end with us. I'll skip some of the supernatural aspects of that story, trying to get more to the practical side of things. But as I said earlier, we don't have to, even on today, we're going to start chanting the Ullambana Sutra, and we'll see from the chanting over the next few weeks that there is kind of the supernatural part of it that we can slightly appreciate. We can appreciate but kind of slightly ignore. But there's a very practical and kind of secular moral of the story there as well, right? And we can understand that Ullambana through the reality that we directly observe, because we know that our parents have influenced us, our upbringing influenced us, that our environment has influenced us, that our actions can also influence other people, and our emotional patterns can be transmitted from one generation to the next. And we know that anger just creates anger, compassion creates compassion, right? Violence creates fear, understanding creates more understanding, deeper understanding. And this is how we can see how dependent origination influences our entire life, right? That we are completely shaped by conditions, and we in turn become conditions for others. So it's not really just simply, what did my parents give me, right? We should also be asking, what am I giving to those who come after me? And this is the deeper responsibility of being alive. I put these in quotes, and I don't know where that quote came from, but I liked it enough that I put it in my notes. Again, the quote was, that is the deeper responsibility of being alive, is asking the question, what am I going to give those who come after me? And so to repay our parents does not mean that we have to somehow calculate everything that they ever gave us and kind of pay it back, right? Obviously, life doesn't work that way. But instead, we can continue, or we can instead repay by continuing the goodness, our goodness, right? So if someone gives us love, we love them back. If someone gives us wisdom, we share that wisdom. If someone sacrificed for us, then we learn to sacrifice for others. And if someone helped us while we were suffering, then we can start to help others who are also suffering. So in that way, gratitude kind of moves forward. It doesn't just stay or not even happen at all. That way we can receive, and we can transform, and we can give back. So during the Ullambana ceremony next week, right, we can pause and reflect and remember our parents, whether they're alive or have already passed. And if they've passed away, then we can try to remember their faces. We can try to remember their voices. We can try to remember the things that they did well, right? And perhaps even the things that they've even struggled with. Because those are also important lessons for us to remember or to learn from. Right? We know that mistakes are objectively on the bad side of things. And we learn from those mistakes by not repeating those same actions, by not repeating those same mistakes. And we can learn from them. And that's how we transform that kind of suffering into something that is compassionate, something that is full of wisdom versus full of suffering. And it's also to recognize that they were also just human beings, just trying to live their lives with the understanding that they had at the time. We know knowledge, for the most part, is very circumstantial, very situational, right? That it has to do a lot with the time and place, right? The knowledge that they had back 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago is completely different than the way that we understand and learn and parent these days. Not that I would know, but I'm assuming the way that if you're parents now, you're parenting differently than how your parents parented you, right? There may be some generational trauma that was kind of given and shared and pushed and shoved and whatever, and some maybe other bad habits or even some good habits that have continued on with you. But generally speaking, overall, the parenting is different, right? I think, for the most part, it's uniquely yours. But it was influenced by your parents, and their parenting style was influenced by their parents, right? And the list goes on and on and on. And so, again, we just have to remember that we are also just human beings, because we also make mistakes. And we have caused suffering, and they may have also caused suffering. And we have suffered, and they've suffered too. And seeing this doesn't erase responsibility necessarily, but it does create understanding. And that understanding creates a possibility of freedom. So another quote here that I somehow did not write down where it came from, but I underlined it, so it must be important. The quote is, that the greatest gift that we can offer our parents, whether they're alive or deceased, is to become free from the suffering that has been passed down to us, and to make sure that we do not pass that suffering forward. I wish I came up with that, but I don't know where it came from. So I'm not a parent. I actually have to take my belief out of this Dharma talk, because I'm an antinatalist, pretty much. So I think it's immoral to bring life into the world. I'm a very odd monk. I'm for some reason, like if I was in a larger monastery, I swear to God, I'd be kicked out. But luckily, at least for now, we don't have to worry about that. But anyway, that's Ullambana. And so we'll see, not necessarily see it next week, but we appreciate our ancestors or our parents, right? That remembering whether they are alive or deceased, that they themselves are always here with us, right? It's very common that when our parents, or any loved one really, passes, that there's so much grief, there's so much sadness, right? There's this really grand sense of loss. Like, oh my God, they're not going to be here anymore. I've lost them. They're no longer in the world. But if you truly think about it, your parents and all of your ancestors have never really gone anywhere, because you are only here because of them, and you are a part of them, whether you like it or not, whether you've ever known your parents or not, whether you've loved them or disliked them or had problems. And knowing that they are a part of you, and your children will be part of them, and their children will be part of you, and the list goes on and on and on, right? It's a continuous line of being part of. That's not really ever lost. And sometimes we think of, oh, eventually, and it's probably true, that eventually their memory will be lost down the line, right? 3 generations from now, 4 generations from now, no one will ever know your name. No one ever will remember you, or your parents, or your ancestors, right? And we can continue the remembrance through the things that we do in life, by the things that we contribute to, right? You can honor the one thing that to me is important when it comes to my parents. Thankful they are still alive, but I know that eventually they will pass, right? And when they do pass, I know the best thing I can do for them and to honor them is to live a good life. Best thing I can do, right? It's not like I had the perfect childhood, nor were they the perfect parents, nor was I the perfect son, right? We all had problems, we all had issues, but at the end of the day, what is the best thing you can offer? Not just for yourself, not just for your parent, but literally for everybody, right? Ironically, I think it was last night or a couple nights before, I was watching this video of some Chinese emperor 1,000 years ago or something that was trying to find, I forgot which dynasty he was in, but he was trying to find or create an immortal elixir. Like, he wanted to be immortal and live forever. Besides the fact of why on earth would you want to live forever? Like, that's such torture, but that's beside the point. But during that he was trying to keep himself alive, actually caused him to die, right? Literally did the exact opposite. But I'm thinking also, like, yeah, maybe you died during the process, but then actually one of the only reasons we know of this emperor, instead of the hundreds of other emperors, is because of his stupid story, right? So he made a name for himself in history because of this belief that he can become immortal. Anyway, the point is it made me think that we don't have to find an elixir of life and try to live forever and kill ourselves in the process, but we can do things that will cause our kind of is to do just that, right? So I don't know who I was talking to, it was probably a month ago, that when our abbot dies, for instance, right, though his physical body will be deceased and gone, right, and eventually we'll wake up and not remember him, perhaps, right? or even then the next generation of monastics may not even know him ever because he had passed away before they got here. But his legacy will forever be here for as long as this temple remains, right? Because he is the founder of our temple. He is our first abbot. And so in 100 years, if this temple is still here, we'll still know the Most Venerable Thích Quang, right? We may have not physically have ever met him, but we know that he existed. And we will know that we are only here, the monastics in this temple and the Sangha are only here because of him, right? And so his legacy will continue on. And so we and our parents and anyone else can do the exact same thing, right? You don't have to have, it just has to be something significant enough, not even significant, that, I hate to use the word good enough, that people after us will remember. And in most adults, it's their children, right? Okay, I'm gonna stop talking. That's Ullambana. The other thing that in case no one's been to an Ullambana ceremony before, one of the rituals that we do is the pinning of roses. And so I'm sure it'll be briefly explained by the MC next weekend, but I also want to briefly explain that practice as well. So there's the ritual pinning of roses. And so we have 3 colored roses, red, pink, and white. And so mid-ceremony, before the chanting, we'll be given a talk about Ullambana and remembering. So again, there's 2 different roses. The red rose is for those that have both parents still alive. And so if both of your parents are alive, you'll take the red rose and they'll pin it on you. If only one of your parents are alive, you take the pink rose and that will be pinned on you. If both the parents are deceased, then you get a white rose and that will be pinned on you. And so that ritual is also helpful in remembering our parents too, right? So during the pinning of that rose, whether parents are still alive or deceased, that is an opportunity for us to be mindful and meditate on our parents and remember them, whether it's good or bad. If it's good, then we want to continue the good. If there were bad moments in their lives that cause harm to us, then we try to acknowledge that and transform that so we don't continue that transgression. Which is a beautiful act. Monastics get yellow roses because we are technically we are emancipated from families, and so we get yellow roses to represent that. Questions, concerns, emotional outbursts. No? Wow. I did either really good or really bad today, so.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
And accepting, like you said, your parents, depending on the knowledge they had when they were here. What place does denial have? Say your alcoholism, alcohol. If you deny that and act like it never existed, what does it do for you?
If you're denying that, then one thing it could potentially do is because, and this is with any kind of traumatic event, whether it's drinking, alcohol, abuse, etc., etc. The more you see it, the more we ignore it, the more we're going to be okay with it. And so if we see it in our significant others or in our children or in our friends or community, that same type of ignorance, right, the ignoring part of it, will be passed on and we'll just be thinking it's all right, it's okay. It's normal almost, right? Which is why in psychology, right, I forgot what the term is, but in psychology, when people grew up in an abusive household, they typically get attracted to abuse in their adult life as well, right? Because it's what they're used to, right? They're almost comfortable with it. Anything that's not abusive is awkward, it's weird, it's untraditional to them, right? And so if you ignore these kind of bad habits, it's essentially what they are, and the mind starts to think of it as normal, as okay, as this is just how it is. It's really not, right? And so that starts to carry on into life. And so when you see it in your significant other, in your children, you're like, oh, yeah, it is what it is. It's not what it is. It's not what it is, right? It's simply ignorance. And we have to be able to recognize that ignorance. Great question. Anything else? Miss Stephanie, I haven't heard a question from you in a month now, even though you've been gone for a while. Do you have a question? I'm not putting you on the spot, your mind's always full of great questions for me, so. What? I am, but what can I do? It is what it is. You don't have a question, I'm totally teasing you, but. Mm-hmm. One of my best friends growing up always came over to my house when we were kids to do kid stuff and play around and do whatever, right? And for years, I don't recall really spending too much time at their house. But I remember I was probably 16, and his grandmother lived at the house. And so his grandmother and mother would speak to each other in such unkind ways. It took me aback so much. Like I remember distinctively thinking to myself, like I remember just like shrinking within myself because I'm like, oh my God, like how does a mother and daughter speak to each other in such a way that was borderline abusive? Like it was a disgusting conversation. But to them, that's just how they spoke. And then years later, my friend would speak to his mother in that same way too. Just very harshly, very direct, very unemotional, very just horrid, right? And I'm thinking, why do you speak to your mother like that? It baffled me, right? And so as I got older, I put two together. Well, if your parents and grandparents spoke to her that way, and you saw it growing up, and you thought that's just how you spoke to your parents, and you're going to speak to your parents in that same way too, right? And that whole craziness just continues. The cycle continues. And so that's one of the most direct experiences that we can see of how that type of whatever it is, trauma, abuse, kindness, gratitude, whatever it may be, passes along. Right? It's a direct reality. And to me, I was like, you can end this cycle of stupidity. Exactly. Exactly. That's why I said it's dependent on time and place, right? To them, during that time and place that they were, it's just normal.
Changes the trajectory of the generations to come.
Right. Right. And yes, ma'am.
So you know in your household that even you as me as a human, I'm not using myself as a human, working on myself and bringing that love and kindness to the house. And you have to take that extra step about allowing the darkness of the pain to do it with love. Like you said, just let go. Which I know I could have done it the old way, the way I was when I was young, what I thought I could have done it.
It is unfortunate for a lot of people that doing the wrong thing is much easier than doing the right thing. Continuing the causes of suffering is much easier than trying to transform those causes of suffering. Because trying to transform the causes of our suffering requires work, whereas just continuing the cause of suffering is just, we don't have to do anything. We just let it be. But to attempt to change or to try to change it is so much more difficult. But the trying to change it is the most courageous thing that anybody can ever do. To try to change the causes of suffering, makes you one of the strongest people ever. Because you have the motive, you have the courage, you have the dedication, you have the wisdom to see those causes of suffering. And you know that this is not true freedom. This is not true happiness, right? And so that simple shift in the mind of knowing that there's this ability to even see that in the first place puts you in such a small population of humanity that also makes you one of the best parts of humanity. Because you can see it. I mean, imagine being blind all your life and one day you wake up, you can see the entire world. Imagine being colorblind and all of a sudden, you've seen those glasses now that you put on, you can see color. Imagine being colorblind and putting those glasses on to see color for the very first time. That's exactly what you're doing. You're putting on and seeing the full spectrum of possibility. Right? And so that possibility gives you so much power and will and be able to help transform what you want to transform. Right? Suffering is going to be there regardless, right? Suffering, just being alive is suffering, right? But the beauty within that suffering is the knowledge and the wisdom of knowing that that suffering doesn't have to continue. It doesn't, right? It is a choice. Suffering is a complete choice. So now your choice is to but the choice of not wanting to suffer is difficult, right? That's the bad part. Bad part is that it's difficult. And to transform it takes time. It takes energy. And it takes immense patience. Because especially if it has to do in the household or within the family, there's so many different characters, there's so many different aspects, there's so many different pieces to that puzzle that it has to be done one by one, slowly, and come to the conclusion of you wanting to transform all that suffering will take a lot of patience. But that patience is your superpower. You have to be able to be patient, right? Which is why our practice is time consuming, because our suffering cannot transform immediately. It cannot transform overnight. It takes time, it takes resolution, it takes dedication to seeing the cause of our suffering, knowing exactly what's being done, how it's being done, and wanting something to change it, right? And so, like, pat on the back for you, right? To be able just to see that suffering literally puts you like in a 1% population of all of humanity. Because most people just sit with their suffering. Most people just live with their suffering because to them it's normal. Yeah, I have to live paycheck by paycheck. Yeah, I'm late on rent, or my job isn't all that great, right? A lot of people are just okay with that, like just how life is. That's not how life should be, right? And so being able to come to that conclusion, come to that decision of, I want change, you're already you've literally have started the engine and you're driving on this path. Where most people, their engine is collecting dust in a locked garage that they've completely forgotten about. But change is possible. Suffering is so, I don't want to say easily ended, but it can be with patience and with compassion, not just for the compassion of wanting to change the situation, but especially compassion for yourself. You have to be able to resist the urge of saying, I don't have the power to change this. Because so many people think like that. I can't change my suffering, right? Because I think their suffering is so big and so consumed in their lives that they feel like there's no escape. But there is an escape. Every room has a door. Yeah, that door may be locked, but the key's inside. You just have to find that key. You're in a dark room. Key's there. It's locked. We've locked it. We've created the darkness. We put ourselves in this box, in this locked room. Because our suffering and our happiness is never caused by external circumstances. If you're suffering, if you're happy, it's because of you. If you have a great life, it's because of you. If your life is full of suffering, it's because of you. So we have to take responsibility as well, right? Not just the acknowledgement that we suffer and we can transform that suffering, but a responsibility that that suffering is mostly created by ourselves, by our own mind, right? By our expectations, by our wants and desires and needs. Right. Very little of our suffering is truly caused by other people, by external circumstances. Because yeah, someone could, like I've said before, someone can come up to you and try to punch you in the throat, or they're insulting you, or they're trying to put you down or throw you under the bus. All right, good for them. But that in itself cannot cause you actual suffering. The suffering comes because of your reaction to it, because of your expectation to it. Oh, they're cussing me out, they're putting me down, they're insulting me. Those words are just words. They're literally made up. They're man-made. They have no true power. But your mind is allowing it or giving it power, which is what's causing that suffering. Right? As an example, is the source of the suffering It's because they're suffering, and what they're doing to cause you suffering is just their way of expressing that suffering. Right? And so, because that's just their way of expression, that means it's you that it's, and how you're taking it in is what's controlling you to suffer. Right? Because someone's expression of suffering is simply just, let's say someone yelled out their suffering. Well, like we've talked about in dependent origination, right? There's that sound. That sound enters in and goes through this ear consciousness, goes into the mind consciousness, and it's the mind, once it creates that, has that contact with those words, is where decisions are made. How are you reacting? How are you responding? The words are just words, literally made up. A whole bunch of letters put together made a word, right? That causes the mind to think this way or that way, and how you react and respond. But once we understand that someone's words and sometimes even actions has no power on us, then whenever those words are heard or said out loud, we can respond with just acceptance and accept that you lashing out at me is just your form of suffering being expressed in words or in actions, right? It's not personal. And that's what causes another part of suffering is we take that personal, because it could be our husband or wife or kid or neighbor, someone that we care about and love, and they're attacking us via our fault. When it's really not. But because we have such an attachment to them, who doesn't want to protect their parents? Right? So continue. Bring in that compassion. Continue to bring in love. Continue to be patient. That is the hardest, but also the most powerful thing you can do. Trust me. It is patience that will make or break the release of our suffering. Thank you for the beautiful question. Okay, we're at time. Please join me in invoking the Buddha's name 3 times. We'll transfer the merit and go to chanting. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. For any positive karmic action we have accumulated here today, we wish to transfer the merit to all sentient beings and wish them full enlightenment. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha.